This drives him wild in the bedroom. Great sex he'll obsess over. This is probably my second favorite conversation centered around sex. I'll tell you my first in a moment. But before we get into talking about men and sex, can we briefly discuss women? A lot of men are crappy lovers. A lot of men are selfish lovers. A lot of men are bad at oral sex. In fact, some men don't even give oral sex. And of course, let's not forget ED as we age. And so we're going to talk about this because let's face it, if he has a hard time to get it up, okay, and no pun intended, wink, wink, these days, men in their 50s, 60s, 70s are just happy if they can get a hard on. The reason why some men are dependent on masturbation and porn, it's because for many men, ED is a serious thing. And the blue pill doesn't always work. And certainly diet and stress plays a big role. Why is this so important? I know this conversation is about what drives him wild in the bedroom, but these are the real things you ladies are faced with today, is that a lot of men, as I said earlier, are crappy lovers. A lot of men are selfish lovers. A lot of men are just bad at it. And a lot of men struggle with getting an erection. So I know many of you are struggling in this capacity. So if this conversation or the title of this video seems one-sided, I think it's important to address the real issues many women are facing. You know, it's interesting. Men have been accused of having sex on the brain. And certainly in my 20s, I certainly did have sex on the brain. Actually, my 20s, my 30s, my 40s, and my 50s. Okay. But why does it seem like a healthy sex life for couples is rare? Why I'm bringing this up is very few couples actually talk about physical intimacy. It's almost as if there's this grand expectation that men are supposed to be good lovers and that women are supposed to be good lovers. And very rarely do they talk about their sex life. And then sadly, very few people actually progress their sex life after that initial phase of when, certainly by the time a lot of married couples, for example, have children, that seems to diminish their sex life. And a lot of couples don't talk about this. Now, I just want to be upfront as I'm shooting this video. I am no sex expert. I'm no expert. But then again, most people giving dating advice and relationship advice aren't even experts in this category either. But let me be upfront. What I'm sharing are my thoughts, my opinions, my perceptions, the way I've observed things. You know, it's interesting. There's this couple I know. They've been married 55 years. They openly admit that they've had a very healthy sex life up until their late 70s, okay? That they had a very regular sex life. I mean, they've shared it with me privately. In fact, I'm going to recommend a book in a moment that they turned me on to actually enhance their sex life, to cultivate their sex life. This was a couple that knew that physical intimacy was an important part of their relationship. And they didn't leave it to just chance to make it work out. Now, the reason why I speak to a demographic of over 40 years old, because men in their 20s and 30s operate completely differently than men in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and even 70s. Why? Because men in their 20s and 30s are usually, well, let me reframe that. Most of the time when they're choosing a potential life mate is they're actually thinking about making babies with someone and raising a family. So how they choose a relationship is radically different than those of us in midlife. If you're in midlife, most likely if you're over 45 years old, you're divorced. Roughly about 75% of singles over 45 years are divorced. And why this is so critically important is that with divorce comes an emotional traumatic event, and then your lives are rather fully curated. And for a lot of people, there's a lot more moving parts to a successful relationship. One of them happens to be the sexual component. You know, the sad thing about sex, I suspect that most of I'm just speculating here. Most of my married friends who got married back when I did 25 plus years ago, I'm certain that they're dealing with ED problems. They're dealing with a lot of situations where they're not having physical intimacy with their partners. However, the single population, those of us that are single, that are in the dating marketplace, sex is on the brain because sex is part of the mating dance. Sex is even part of the decision-making process to choose to be in a committed relationship with someone. Let me repeat that. Sex is part of the decision-making process, and yet there's a lot of shame. There's a lot of fear centered around sex. There's a lot of people that have duct tape, excuse the pun, over their mouth regarding sex. And so my hope is with this conversation, we draw a little attention to maybe what could improve couples' sex life if they go in with a deeper awareness. In fact, half of divorced couples state that sex and intimacy was the primary cause of their breakup. Let me repeat that. Sex and intimacy was the primary cause of their breakup. In fact, humans often bury their heads in the sand, and there's always this, this is my observation, this grand expectation around sex, and yet very rarely is it discussed, particularly in the early stage of dating. So I want to briefly talk about a book. Many of you know I refer this over and over again. There's a book called 8 Dates by Doctors John and Julie Gottman. What I want to do is open up to chapter 3. Chapter 3. Do you see that? It says, let's get it on, sex and intimacy. Now, what this book is about, 8 dates, it's 8 essential conversations to have with a potential partner to talk about the more serious aspects of the mating dance. And so let's go to chapter 3 for a moment. Bear with me a second. Let's get it on. So let's find, by the way, I'm just pulling out some things here. Oh, by the way, it starts off, the first chapter, this chapter starts off, I'll admit it, we did have sex on the first date, and it tells the story about a couple. But what this book also outlines is conversations about sex. And you could offer some open-ended questions. For example, think about all the times we've had sex. What are some of your favorite? What about the time what made it favorite for you? Also, what's your turn-ons? How can I enhance our passion? In other words, this book offers some great conversation starters to talk about how to improve your sex life in the very early stages of dating. Now, you might actually want to read chapter 1 of this book with somebody because chapter 1 is all about trust and commitment. But I highly recommend having these conversations. So when you get to what I'm about to share in a moment, what men consider great sex, or what really, it's really to enhance both of your pleasure in the bedroom. Okay, so what drives a man wild? Well, let's first start with most men want sex on their timetable. Ideally, most men are seeking what I call an agreeable partner in the bedroom. Now, this can be rather challenging, in the beginning stage of dating where you're hot and heavy for one another, that's usually not a problem, but something does usually shift the minute two people become very comfortable with one another. And I can say to you, both men and women appreciate an agreeable partner that wants, now this is where it gets tricky, where one person wants to have sex and the other person doesn't have sex. Now, a lot of people will tell you that a woman should submit to her man whenever he feels like having sex. A lot of the not Puritan conversation, but a lot of the traditionalists believe it's the man is the superior in the relationship and a woman must submit. I don't subscribe to that. At the same time, I think couples should have conversations about what's important to them in the bedroom, and certainly recognize that while we might not always be in the mood, I once had a partner say to me, there are times when I'm not in the mood, but I'm not going to say anything about it because usually once you get the engine running, I'm usually in the mood thereafter. And so she stopped what she was saying to me. In the past, she would resist it. but she recognized that she only did herself a disservice. So having an agreeable partner is what a lot of men wish for. And certainly I've heard the same in reverse for women as well. Now, one thing I've noticed is many couples, not all, but many couples wish for oral sex. Okay. Men wish for oral sex, women wish for oral sex, and certainly oral sex to completion. If we want to know what drives a man wild, and certainly a lady would appreciate this as well, is somebody who gives oral sex and certainly takes it to completion. Not everybody does this. I know not a lot of women will not sustain it for that period of time. But if you want to know what a lot of men like, certainly that's the case. And I suspect you women want a man who's going to continue in that department until you've actually reached some level of orgasm. Now, the third thing I'm about to share is most men want an enthusiastic partner. Most men want an enthusiastic partner. You know, it saddens me today where sex has gotten to the point where it's just obligatory for some people. And that saddens me because ideally, this should be the most sacred part of your relationship. This should be the most passionate part of your relationship. This should be the most exciting part of your relationship. This should be the most enthusiastic aspect of your relationship. And yet, when we get too comfortable with someone, we take this experience for granted. You know, I've noticed that a lot of men are sex on the brain, as I said earlier. And a lot of men are struggling in this capacity. And they might not seem as enthusiastic because of that struggle of ED that I talked about earlier. This is the tricky aspect of dating, mating, and relating for those of us in midlife, is that our bodies physically change and we might not be as enthusiastic. And yet at the same time, isn't this the juice of being in a romantic relationship? Is that fire, that passion in the bedroom? Shouldn't we be cultivating that instead of just leaving it up to chance or just leaving it up to, the false expectations and narratives that are created out there? So I mentioned earlier about a couple who's been married over 55 years that up until their late 70s had a very regular sex life. They told me towards the last 10 years, they told me it was on average of twice a week from their 65 till their 75 years. Okay, not married, but how old they were. But the husband turned me on to a book once at a workshop we were at, and the book is called Coming. Okay, take a look at that book. Okay, it's a very tantric type of, you can find this on Amazon. It's a very slim book, but it's poetry designed to create sexual intimacy. And I think when I talk about enthusiasm, I'm suggesting maybe getting this as part of your repertoire. So I'm just going to read just just a small quote from the book. It's not in my mind. All my sense receptors are telling me you're a desirable creature. You go into my head. I come to my senses. I come to my senses. This is a really cool book. You may want to check it out. You can go to Amazon. There's a link below to get all of Jonathan Recommends books below. But having that enthusiasm, spicing things up, I think couples should spend more time talking about physical intimacy in that excitement kind of way instead of the obligatory way that oftentimes couples, or just really the mechanics of physical intimacy and actually adding the heart to the equation. Okay, another thing that drives men wild is most men want to know they please their partner. In other words, they want to know that you've had an orgasm, whether it's vaginally or through oral sex. We men have gigantic egos in this capacity, and we certainly want to know that we've satisfied you in the bedroom. Now, I recognize a lot of women struggle in this capacity. I mean, and now some say it's biological, some say it's psychological. But certainly, I would want to have conversations with my partner to know what actually makes them feel good and letting them know what makes you feel good, what turns you on, what brings you to an orgasm. And again, I'm here to encourage just conversations in this area. And the sooner you have these conversations, the better. Now, one thing I've spoken to some men and they gave me this advice. They said, I appreciate a woman who's willing to push sexual boundaries. Willing to push sexual boundaries. That's not all men, but a lot of men appreciate a woman who will push boundaries. Now, what are those boundaries? It might be talking dirty. It might be talking about threesomes. It might not actually be doing it, but just that conversation, or maybe touching parts of the body that are considered taboo to some degree. Certainly men and women appreciate somebody who's willing to push boundaries. Now, understand that this is in the context of consensual sex. This is in the context of two people that are exploring each other's bodies at a more intimate way, but in a committed nature. I'm here to say if you're having regular sex with someone, that sex should be monogamous, and certainly from a dating perspective, that should be exclusive. That should be exclusive. I'm a big proponent of people to being monogamous and exclusive if they're having regular sex together. Now, I'm going to share a few more things that men appreciate in the bedroom that drives them wild, because great sex is something he'll obsess over. Here's the thing. Most emotionally mature men want true emotional intimacy through sex. The feeling of being at home, that's what men will say. When an emotionally grown-up man is with a woman at having physical intimacy, it's not just sex anymore. It's actual emotional intimacy. And that physical connection with you feels like something safe, something sacred, something that a lot of men will use the phrase like home. If any of you have heard this from men, do me a favor, write this in the chat box or write it in the comment. I've heard men say to me when they've had physical intimacy that it feels like home. I can say this from personal experience. There's just something that brings us to the divine, that brings us on a spiritual level, on an emotional level, something that's actually sacred. And while not all men experience this, because they're oftentimes too much in their head, they're too broken, they're not in their heart, I will say emotionally mature men actually crave emotional intimacy along with the physical intimacy. I'm going to repeat that. They crave emotional intimacy along with the physical intimacy. And the last thing I'm going to share here, and this is going to be a tough one. Emotionally broken men just see the act of sex as performance. And emotionally healthy couples want to play in the bedroom. Let me repeat that. Emotionally broken men just want the physical act of ejaculation. But these men, and they're often very selfish lovers. They're not very intuitive lovers. They're not very giving lovers. It's just they want the pleasure because they're emotionally broken. And we can talk about that a little more. Because when a man doesn't feel good about himself, when he's gone through a contentious divorce, when he's going through challenges in his professional life, when he's having physical challenges in his life, maybe he's got some other area of his life where the ground underneath him doesn't feel very solid, he's feeling emotionally broken, sex is just merely an act for ejaculation. Whereas emotionally healthy couples, they want, well, I'm going to assume this for you, but it seems to me that emotionally healthy couples want play in the bedroom. They want fun in the bedroom. They want to be able to laugh. They want to be able to cuddle. They want to be able to spoon one another. They want some sort of euphoria because listen, we're in a romantic relationship with your best friend who's also your lover, ideally. If you are with your emotional best friend and you're with your physical lover, it's about this play in the bedroom and not just the act of ejaculation like broken men often experience. So I want to invite you all to take this, what drives them wild in the bedroom, all of these principles I just shared with you, and invite you to maybe have deeper conversations early on in the process. Don't have duct tape over your mouth. Have these conversations, because guess what? Being vulnerable brings you much closer to another person when you're being vulnerable. And just remind, for those who know my book, What the Heck is Self-Love Anyway? A Journey of Personal Development, Self-Help, and Spiritual Work. Remember, chapter 1, speak your truth, do it with kindness. But chapter 9, if it's sincere and from the heart, you can't say the wrong thing to the right person. And when you start off with vulnerability and integrity, you build the deep roots of trust, through emotional intimacy and physical intimacy as well. Is this sinking in? Is this resonating with you? I'd like to hear your thoughts on what I just shared. Post a comment below. I do my best to read them all in the first 24 hours. As always, if you find value in my videos, please hit that like button. Please share this video. Please subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell as well. And also, go to your phone, click down to that notification, add YouTube notifications on your bell as well. And if you want to connect with me directly, hey, there's links below to schedule a discovery call with me to see if working with a coach is right for you. There's a link to join my group called Midlife Love Mastery. There's a link to follow me on Instagram. There's a link to get my dating vows, which is essential before having physical intimacy. Click the links below if you want to connect with me directly. All right, those who know my live format know it's time for Q&A. If you have a question, there's a little chat box down below. Write the word question, then post the question thereafter. Or you can purchase a super sticker, super chat. There's a little $ in the chat box. All of the monies from the super sticker, super chat goes to a scholarship fund in the name of my son, Connor Asley. That's a picture of him right there with his brother. He's my son who passed away over 6 years ago. In his honor, we donate to causes like the Hoffman Process, Insight Institute, and scholarships to coaching as well. And guess what? Our goal tonight is $100 because Debbie was gracious enough to give us $50 donation. Can I give you a big, gigantic Jonathan Bear hug? Debbie, thank you for the love. We really appreciate it. So our goal is $50 or 50 additional dollars to hit 100. So thank you so much. All right, let's see what we've got here. Lynn says, this is resonating with me. Debbie says, this is resonating with me. I love being playful and enjoy each other's even after sex. Absolutely. You know, it saddens me how few couples actually talk about physical intimacy. And yet it's one of the top reasons why relationships end. Or at least marriages end. Remember I said earlier in the conversation, how many couples you know, they've been married for 25 plus years and they're not even having physical intimacy anymore? I mean, that's kind of sad to some degree. Then you're just roommates that share a bed in many cases. I mean, part of the juice in life is to have physical intimacy. That's why for those of us in midlife, we actually, in some ways, we've shed that relationship where you've lost interest with one another. And my hope is you get another 10 or 20 years of great sex in your life. Hence why I'm doing this video. Catherine says, physical intimacy and emotional intimacy go hand in hand, and both are comfy, easy to discuss since they're very special, important elements of relationship. Actually, sadly, no, it does not. A lot of men in particular, but not always. I would say many couples have physical sex, but they don't have an emotional connection. They have duct tape on their mouth. Ideally, yes. And certainly emotionally mature people, emotional grown-ups have, and people actually more connected with their heart are capable of experiencing true emotional intimacy. What I've observed, and ladies, you're not going to be happy with what I'm going to share with you. I've observed many women who struggle actually understanding their emotions and then actually articulating their feelings in a way to be seen, heard, and understood. So while I appreciate that you might think that goes well in theory, but in many cases, that is not the case. Many people just have the physical act, but not have the emotional connection. And I know a lot of women that will have obligatory sex with their partner, and they are completely disconnected on an emotional level, which is why I'm a big proponent if you haven't read the book Emotional Intimacy by Robert Masters, is actually learn the skills to communicate your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions in a way that can be seen, heard, and understood. Thank you for posting that, but I don't agree that they go hand in hand. All right, let's keep going. Let's keep going. Question from Rosa. Here we go. Do men understand that women really only climax an orgasm through clitoral stimulation? Well, actually, I'm not an expert, but I'm also familiar with G-spot stimulation as well. And I just personally know many women who have had intense climax and orgasms through G-spot stimulation as well. Do men know this? I would say most men should know this. Most men should know this. Are there a lot of unconscious men in the bedroom? It took me a lot of experiences before I understood what it took to actually help a woman achieve an orgasm. So I would say most men should, I didn't say do, but most men should know that clitoral and also G-spot stimulation can effectively give a woman an orgasm. Again, I'm not an expert in this area. This is just my perceptions on these thoughts. And by the way, if anyone wants to clarify anything for me, I am more than happy to hear any additional advice. Julie says, when do I ask my boyfriend why he doesn't care about sex anymore? It's been 6 months. He's still very good to me, but I don't understand. Tonight, after this video, you might want to have a conversation about your physical intimacy. Now, if you're afraid it's going to end the relationship, then how weak is your relationship? W-E-A-K, weak. Because if a relationship is strong, it can certainly handle a conversation. So you might want to bring up the fact that you've noticed that your relationship is no longer a physically intimate relationship between the two of you. And you have to decide how important that is for you. If it's not important, the fact that you haven't even discussed it in 6 months, I'm wondering how important it is to you. If it is very important, then you should have a conversation. Because I want you to imagine this. What if your boyfriend was wondering why they weren't having sex, but he went out to go get sex elsewhere? I'm not suggesting, Julie, that's what you do or you have done, but these are where the problems lead. So talk about your physical intimacy with them. Have a real sit down, have a heart-to-heart conversation with them. Say, honey, there's something really important I want to share with you that affects our relationship. And I'd like to share something that's coming up for me. So that's my invitation for you, Julie. Do it tonight, do it tomorrow, do it this weekend, but do it now. That's your question. That's my answer. Okay. Let's keep going here. Let me see. Rosa says, if a couple can's not intimate, you're no longer in a real relationship. You know, I guess what you're effectively saying, you're no longer in a relationship that includes sex. Now, there's many different forms of relationships. There are many couples. I mean, I highly doubt my parents were having sex the last 10 years of their marriage before my mother passed away, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they did. Sometimes people build a relationship for a variety of different reasons, and they got all their sex in the first 30 years. They don't need it anymore. But I don't know if I agree with that statement, but I understand, but again, what's the meaning of a real relationship? Okay. Keisha, how to build confidence in oral sex when I've never did that before? Wow, that's a great question. You may want to hire a female sex expert that includes physical touching as part of this component. I mean, you might want to consider that. I live in Los Angeles and near Venice Beach and that general vicinity of Santa Monica or Topanga, a very woo-woo area. I suspect you could hire a sex expert that could help you in that capacity. And actually, practicing on another woman might not be a bad suggestion because she can give you feedback. Oh, wait a minute. Let me reframe that. I was thinking the other way around. You would need a male guy to practice on, although I don't think your partner would appreciate that. You know what? There are videos on YouTube. Someone write this in the chat box. Kara O, Kara space OH, Kara O. She's a dear friend of mine. Sadly, she passed away a few years ago. But in her mid 60s, she did a video giving examples of how to give oral sex. So please reverse what I said earlier and check out videos on how to give oral sex. There are plenty of videos on that on the internet here on YouTube as well. And it's a worthwhile video to watch. She did a great job. Kara O, Kara space OH, and just type in blowjobs or oral sex, okay? Hey, Kristen's in the house. I'm going out with a guy this weekend and his friend keeps asking me out. What do I do? That's kind of interesting. Well, actually, no. I mean, you're going out on a first date. You're going out with a guy this weekend. So I'm assuming this guy that you're going out with is not your boyfriend, and one of his friends keep asking you out. Do you feel like going out with the friend? If you don't feel like going out with the friend, you simply decline. And you could say, hey, I'm exploring a relationship with your other friend, and I would appreciate, I'm not interested, so I would appreciate that we discontinue this conversation. You can do it in a very classy, respectful, diplomatic way, and just be honest with them. But I'm assuming you're going out with the guy for the first time this weekend, and when you say his friend keeps asking you out, I'm assuming it's not 500 times or 200 times or 50 times or 10 times. He's asked you out a few times. Simply decline because you're interested in somebody else. That would be the respectful thing to do. Diane wants to remind everyone, internal stimulation works here, so both are great. Yes, that I'm talking about that G-spot stimulation. From what I've experienced, that a lot of women seem to have a pretty intense orgasm through G-spot stimulation, which is internal and clitoris is external, or on the cusp of that. Okay. CV says, why do I always end up having the higher sex driver 1 or 2 years into the relationship? I can't answer that for you. Maybe, like, by the way, I do believe some people's libidos are much higher than others. This can be very problematic in the dating process. This is why it's important to have these conversations sooner rather than later. Oh, here's Miss Edwards says, I'm in a long distance relationship and I feel emotional intimacy, which is a deep spiritual connection with my partner. All right. So long distance and sex. A lot of times people resort to phone sex during a long distance dating dynamic. I've always said, folks, if you're going to consider a long distance relationship, after you've been physically intimate with one another and you've agreed you're going to explore a relationship together, I think you should start working on a plan as soon as possible to take the distance from long to short. I believe within 6 months to 1 year at the very latest, that plan should be discussed very early on, and it should be implemented between the 6th month and a year. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself in what's known as a bubble relationship, where it's a fantasy, where you have vacation time together and you're not building something deeper. I would be very cautious if you don't have a plan. Vance says, it took 5 months of dating for my guy to kiss me, and he still hasn't pressed for sex. We are now 7 months of casual dating. We're exclusively dating. I've never encountered this before. That's very surprising. Most men don't invest their time and their resources if they're not getting physical intimacy. I guess the question is, have you built a solid relationship with one another? That might be something worth having a conversation. In fact, if you feel like having a conversation about it, I've just posted a link right now in the chat box. If you want to connect with me directly, if you'd like to be live and on camera with me, let's have a conversation about your sex life, or anything else you'd like to talk about, that link has just been posted in the chat box. Brown Canetta says, woo woo, Topanga. Exactly. All right. Rose wants to know, Jonathan, up to what age would you like to keep having sex? Till I die. I guess I hope I live a fair long life, but probably I would like to have it till the day I die. In fact, wouldn't it be a great way to go while you're having sex? Not for the woman, but certainly for me, that'd be a great way to go. Anyway, Rosa also posted Cara O. You want to type in oral sex or blowjob in YouTube. Elizabeth says, I got good at orals by figuring it out on my own with partner, asking, don't copy others. The reason why I suggested something else is there might be some reservation for that person, Elizabeth. And yes, I fully agree. Practicing on your partner is the best way to go, but maybe watching a tutorial ahead of time might give you some insight to prepare you for that practice with a partner. So Elizabeth, I appreciate what you shared, and I want to piggyback on that as well. True Morris is in the house. Is it a thing for men to take Viagra just to make them feel bigger, even though they are not having sex? It says it makes him feel better. I suspect there are men who take it for maybe if what you're saying is for vanity reasons, I could see men possibly doing that to make them feel a little bit more virile, even if they're not having sex. I would say Viagra is very common for most men over 50 years old. I can't guess the number, but I would venture to say well over 50% of men in that age bracket are using the blue pill. I use the blue pill. I don't use it unless I'm having sex because I covet the pill as well. Michelle wants to suggest, we were talking about oral sex. Google sex with Sue. There's a lot of different sex experts there. Sue Johnson. By the way, she wrote the book, if I'm thinking it's the same Dr. Sue Johnson, wrote the book, Hold Me Tight, 7 Conversations for a Lifetime of Love. This isn't necessarily about sex. This is understanding to really create. Here, let me put that book again. I'm assuming you mean the same Sue Johnson, but Hold Me Tight, 7 Conversations for a Lifetime of Love. I should start talking more about this book, which I'll add in my repertoire more often. Lynn says, Elizabeth, yeah, you fumble around at first, then figure it out. That is true. I learned through fumbling around. Wasn't probably very attractive to those women, but thankfully I had some women I got to fumble around with, so I got better at it as I aged. As I said earlier, but Tia says consulting a sex surrogate will solve some of your concerns. I do actually know some sex surrogates here in Los Angeles. Their job is to help take the stigma out of sex and help people really connect at a more heart-centered level. Let's keep going here. Bum, 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 bum. Oh, here's something interesting. Clara says, at least once a month, my boyfriend needs BDSM sex where he controls everything that will happen and how. He needs that as a compensation for everyday life. I think it's still fun, though. You know, there's certainly, everybody has different desires in the bedroom. And I suspect, in fact, from what I understand, a lot of successful, powerful men appreciate being dominated or dominating somebody. Some high power, oftentimes it relates to high power, but that's high power meaning people that have really high-end stressful jobs. But this doesn't relate to, by the way, this can relate to anybody in this capacity, but they oftentimes need to either feel controlled or feel like they can really control someone to release a lot of pent up energy for them. So, and this is just my brief understanding. Again, I'm not an expert in this capacity. Okay. Catherine wants to remind us Dr. Ruth was adorable, comfortable, and priceless when it came to sex conversations. Talking about sex flows like talking about any other topic, such as money. Yes, I would agree. In an ideal situation, people would feel comfortable, should feel comfortable talking about sex and or money. Sadly, many people, as I continually point out, have duct tape over their mouth, and duct tape is simply an illustration of fear. That's what duct tape represents, fear. Ideally, it should be something that we should talk about with absolute ease. When you feel safe with someone, you feel more open to wanting to talk about these things. But yes, I would agree in an ideal situation, and yet we do have to recognize a lot of people don't feel comfortable. And my hope is even this conversation gives you a little bit of courage to have more deeper conversations with someone in the future. All right, let's keep going here. France says, please YouTube grapefruit oral. LOL, guaranteed banger. Grapefruit oral. Okay, I have to check that out. Let's keep going here. Okay, let's keep going here. Rosa says, let's not sugarcoat it. BDSM is more for people who had issues growing up, more mental and health problems. You know, I mean, I could see where there's some truth to that. I can also see that there are a lot of people that might be emotionally healthy, like to explore, things, outside the norm. I'm not here to say, the motivation for it. What you have to do if you're going to have a partner that desires that is having conversations about it. That's mostly, if you notice, the predominant narrative and theme I'm talking about is having conversations. That's the most important thing. Gigi wants to point out, I would discourage anyone from taking Viagra for sport. There are psychological reasons a man experiences ED. Artificial redirecting blood flow can cause side effects, some life-threatening. I would tend to agree with that, not to take it as sport for ego purposes like it could have been possibly described with that person. So I would agree with that. All right, let's keep going. But everybody keeps talking about grapefruit, okay? Hey, if anyone wants to join the hot seat, or if anyone wants to donate to the Connor Asley Scholarship Fund, if 20 of you just donated $2.50, we could hit that goal of $100 tonight. I'd really appreciate the love. Hey, if you found this conversation valuable, do me a favor right now and hit that like button. Please share this video. Please subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell. And also, if you want to connect with me directly, there's links below to schedule a discovery call with me to see if working with a coach is right for you. Gigi wants to let True Morris know, the body knows which organs are vital. As we age, we experience circulatory challenges. The body adjusts by keeping blood flow to the heart and brain. Again, I would agree that taking a blue pill just for sport isn't necessarily a good idea. But I would certainly. Hey, does someone have a question for me? Listen, we're going to wrap up early. I need some content here to talk about this. Have you found value in what I've shared so far? I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. Claire says, open conversation is everything. One of the reasons why books like 8 Dates, or look at Hold Me Tight. Here, let's open this up. Hold Me Tight. 7 Conversations for a Lifetime of Love. Okay, so a couple conversations that are listed here on page 65, recognizing the demon dialogues. Recognizing the demon dialogues. Finding the raw spots, revisiting the rocky moments, hold me tight, engaging in connection, forgiveness, forgiving injuries, bonding through sex and touch, keeping your love alive. Let's go to page 185, bonding through sex and touch. Let's go here. Okay. Passion comes easily in the early days of a relationship. Almost every word, glance, and touch vibrates with lust. It's nature's way of drawing us together. But after the first captivating rush of desire. What's the place of sex in a relationship? Besides pulling us in, can sex also help us keep us together to build a lasting relationship? Again, this chapter goes on and on. I highly recommend checking out the book, okay? And it's listed below, okay? All right. Elizabeth, how common is anal sex? I'm 54. My boyfriend is 44, wants to do it. I'm not interested. I guess the question is, does it matter if it's common or not? Now, I will say that some couples engage in this, so enough to where I can't predict a percentage, but I'll just throw out a number for fun, 10%. I don't know if that's the case. I'm just making it up. But certainly you are welcome to have a boundary in something that might feel incredibly uncomfortable. I guess the question is, how are you going to address this? Have you shared with your partner you're not interested? How did he respond? Did he respect your choice? Is that something mandatory for him to continue the relationship? These are the kind of conversations I'd want you to have. All right, let's keep going here. Oh, Poultry Flowers is in the house. Should a couple get tested together before having sex? You know, I would venture to say it would be a good idea, especially if someone has just had a recent partner or they've had several lovers. I know this is a challenge to know this. I would encourage people to have these conversations. And by the way, you can go, there's free clinics all around every corner, on every street corner, and I'm exaggerating that, but certainly I'm sure you can find a clinic in your area where you can get tested, and I would highly recommend that. I haven't always done that in my own life, but I've certainly done it sometimes, and I usually go in with a panic. I hope to God I don't have AIDS, because there's a long incubation period. But thankfully, the last time I got tested, everything is fine. And I do get blood tests almost pretty much once a year, and I do ask to be checked for that. Helen wants to say, Jonathan, great advice. Thank you very much. Julie wants to know that, hey, guys dread the words, we need to talk. That is so true. And yet bringing up the touchy subjects brings two people closer together. So the more tough conversation you have, the deeper roots of trust that's built in the relationship. Amanda wants to go, question off topic. How often do you think people in healthy relationships have sex a week? You know, that's a great question. You know, I'd like to hope it's twice a week is their minimum average. Certainly at least once a week is their average. But you know what? Each couple is different. And I guess the question is, what is a healthy relationship is a good question as well. So you've got to kind of define what is a healthy relationship, and you got to define each person's desires in the bedroom. The most important thing I've said throughout this video is have conversations, have conversations, have conversations. McCoy Hill, Oaks Hill Farm is in the house. Question, Jonathan, what do you think about a guy talking about sex right away when you first meet and talk? How would you about it? I find some flirties, others quite vulgar. So I don't know if I talked about this in my video of how men test women, but I did briefly talk about this in a video I did a couple days ago. Oftentimes, men will test your boundaries when it comes to physical intimacy. I know I've done this. Now, I've certainly tried to read the room, knowing if I felt there was a connection between the two of us, I might throw out a sexual innuendo. I happen to have one that I've used before to see a person's reaction. I will tell you that 99 out of 100 times, not that I've said it 99 out of 100 times, but I would say that percentage, it's because I certainly felt that they would probably be receptive to some level of sexual innuendo. And it gave me a level of understanding how they would operate on a sexual level. Now, I'm saying that some men do this blatantly, men do this unconsciously. I certainly am aware that I like to test boundaries. Hey, listen, folks, I'm no picnic. I am not the most evolved person on the planet. The reason why I can give you advice the way I do is because I've been an emotionally broken man. I've been a player. I've been a serial dater. I've been all of those things, and it's taken me a lifetime to get to the level of emotional maturity that I'd like to think I now have. And I've certainly learned to control. I don't think with my little head anymore. In fact, I probably think too much with my big head. All right. I'm shy and it's very difficult to talk about sex with my boyfriend. Any suggestions on how to get me started talking about sex with him? Well, I think you have to address your fear. What is your fear about? Like the shyness. Okay. So this is more about you. I would address what fear do you have centered around having a conversation about sex. My suspicion is your fear of rejection, your fear of abandonment. That's probably your gigantic fear. My suspicion is. And I would address your fear by really evaluating the strength of your relationship. If you can't talk about the difficult things, then how strong is your relationship right now? Give your relationship a strength meter on a scale from 1 to 20. How strong is this relationship? And if your relationship only registers a 9 out of 20, you might want to build the deep roots of trust. So much so that you feel so safe with this person by doing the radical honesty things that I talk about both in my private coaching and read these books. Might be a great start. I would recommend reading the book on the chapter around sex as a way for you to get prepared to have that conversation. But I would address your fear. That's the most important thing. Debbie says boundaries with the booty for me. I get that. Kathy is in the house. I have only been with one man who takes Viagra and he seldom has an orgasm or it takes a lot of work. I have no one else to compare. Is this normal? Kathy, great question. So, a lot of men masturbate as a way to release. And they've become so accustomed to their own physical touch that it makes it very difficult for many men to ejaculate. In addition, if a man is in his head, he's oftentimes not feeling his body. That could be also, he could be experiencing stress, or there hasn't been enough trust built between the two of you. You said, I don't know if this man is your boyfriend or not, but I would say he's not feeling emotionally safe, doesn't feel that trust. He might have a lot of stress going on, or he probably is so used to masturbation, possibly with porn, that he hasn't allowed himself enough experiences with you to ejaculate. And it can take some time, especially if a man masturbates a lot. Also, women also have this, from what I understand, and I'm not the expert here, women who use a vibrator habitually oftentimes can't ejaculate with a man or have an orgasm because they're so accustomed to that one vibration that a lot of men can't compete with that. So this is the challenge with masturbation, possibly as the primary reason why that's happening. Again, I'm not a sex expert. I'm here just to share what I on an anecdotal level, what I've heard through people I've spoken to and in studies as well. I mean, what I've studied, in content as well. Okay, Clara. What role does vulnerability play in maintaining intimacy, and how can we practice it effectively? I would say it plays the most important role of a relationship. In fact, interestingly enough, I posted a meme today on my YouTube channel, or excuse me, on my Facebook page. Hold on one second. Let me bring this up. Bear with me, but I want to read to you this meme. And it says, read it. We're often afraid of being vulnerable, but vulnerability creates genuine connection. Gabby Bernstein. Start with something small to be vulnerable. What is vulnerability? It's usually expressing something that creates fear or pain. Start with a small one and build upon that would be my recommendation. Okay. And vulnerability builds trust. Rosa wants to say, if you're actively having sex, you should ask for STD test at an annual wellness or annual OBGYN preventative appointment. It's common sense, ladies. I would agree with that. I think I got tested when was my last I'd say less than a year ago, I had my last doctor's visit with a blood test. No, actually, what am I talking about? I had a blood test just recently. I forgot about that. Jan says, question, why won't my boyfriend just believe me when I tell him he's amazing and I don't care that I won't and can't have an orgasm? You know, you're effectively, what on an emotional level, if a man doesn't feel like he can't satisfy you, he doesn't feel like a man. I recognize that you can say all these things to him, but you can't effectively change how he feels in his virility. If you're unable to have an orgasm, we men take that many men, not all, take that gigantically personal. And so just telling him he's amazing isn't enough. I would venture to say, have you asked him how he feels about that? Like, have a conversation and talk about how, by the way, I suspect if he got really granular with his feelings, he's probably feeling a level of shame, level of embarrassment, a lack of masculinity. And by the way, this could dramatically affect your relationship. So I think it's important to not tell him, but find out what's going on inside of him. That's what emotional intimacy is, ladies. I know many of you, look at you, just because you can vomit your feelings and emotions to your girlfriend doesn't mean you're actually good at articulating your feelings to a partner. This is where it's important, where couples have deeper conversations and use the books I recommend, like Emotional Intimacy, so you can build that trust, so you can have that conversation. Is this sinking in? Is this resonating? Please let me know. Julie says, I took the duct tape off, but he avoided talking about the relationship stuff. We agreed to enjoy the evening, having drinks and watching a show. Yeah, he wants to avoid talking about the relationship because he's uncertain about the relationship and he doesn't want to have a conversation about something he's uncertain about. Fancy says, going back to my initial question, the guy I'm dating has had loads of casual sex in his previous history. Not sure why he's taking things slow now. Maybe because sex implies seriousness to some people, but why not ask him? Hey, you've had lots of casual sex. I'm curious why you're taking things slow. And just remember, taking things slow usually is code for, I don't want to make a promise I can't keep on a commitment level. So I want to drag this out as far as possible. Catherine says, just as men are worried about their bodies, women being comfortable with their own bodies is important to men too. Comfortably allow for everything to move naturally. I would agree 100%. Women have body issues, men have body issues, meaning a fear around not being rejected for the way we look. Certainly men worry about that in the area of height or hair. Women on their physical and weight oftentimes tends to be. And this is where you can own your sovereignty by being happy with who you are. All right. Debbie says, exactly, Jonathan. Jerry says, yes, J.A., spot on. R.N. Lynn says, resonating with me. Roller Girl says, resonating. Debbie says, sinking in. Great time tonight. I'm happy that this conversation had value. Hey, if it did, listen, I want to hear what you thought about this conversation. Post a comment below. I'd like to hear all your thoughts. As always, if you find value in my videos, please hit that like button. Please share this video. Please subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell on YouTube and also right here on your notifications as well. so you can be notified of new videos. And if you want to connect with me directly, there's links below to schedule a discovery call with me to see if working with a coach is right for you. There's a link to join my group called Midlife Love Mastery, where you can have direct access to me on a regular basis for just $20 a month. Also, if you want to get the books I recommend, they're listed below. Follow me on Instagram. Get my dating vows all listed below. All right, we're going to wrap up this video as we always do. First off, give myself a big, gigantic Jonathan Merrick of self-love. I'm going to reach into the camera and give you a hug of love if that's okay. I'm asking you to turn to someone, a pet, a teddy bear, a pillow. Give it or them a hug of love, because hugs are a great source of love. And let's face it, we could all use more love in our lives. I want to give big props to Debbie for that $50 super sticker. We missed our goal of $100 tonight, but I appreciate your love. Natty Crafts, Brown Canetta, RN Lynn, Joe Daisy, Julie, Catherine, Kristen, Jerry, I said Joe Daisy, McCoy Hill, Elizabeth, Jerry, Gigi, Francie, Julie, everyone, Jan, big hugs. Thanks for the love. Wishing you all a super duper wonderful evening. Bye-bye now.